Good evening. Thank you all so much for coming, showing your interest about our city, about our region. We have special guests today. I'll be very brief, and the program will start. First of all, will all city council members please stand if you recognize? All city council members. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, I want to thank you. So as not to take too much time, Governor McCall, Virginia's governor, sent two people up today to represent him. The first, I will ask Ms. Molly Ward to come to say a few words. She's the Secretary of Natural Resources. Ms. Ward.
Good evening. I guess I can't talk as loudly as the mayor. Good evening. I'm here today with David Paler, the Director of DEQ for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we've been meeting with local elected officials today. We also toured the water treatment facility. We met briefly with EPA, and we've also talked extensively with the city manager and those who work for the city government. And we promise and pledge to you that we are going to monitor the situation closely on behalf of the administration. And we are here for you and as a resource for the city. So we are here to listen to you and to the EPA this evening. And I also want to introduce David Paler, who's Director of DEQ, as I mentioned, is here with me. And David, I don't know if you want to say a few words.
Well, I don't think this works. I'm with the Department of Environmental Quality, and we are working very closely with EPA from the outset to make sure that first that we got the problem arrested, and that we were immediately working with the city of Danville. The health department was as well to make sure that water quality, drinking water was safe. We're going to be on site and working with EPA throughout this process. We'll be in communication with them. There's the emergency response that's going on right now. There's the process of making sure that that the public is safe here, and you're going to hear more about that from EPA. And then there's the long-term process that we've got, assessing whatever environmental damage has been done, of making sure that there's all the remediation that can be done is done, that we understand what the damage is, and that we follow through on that to the appropriate conclusion for holding Duke Energy responsible for compensation and all of that. So it's a long process. We're going to be involved in it all the way, and we're here to make sure that you and the environment are protected, as is EPA, and they're going to explain all the work that they've been doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, the reason that we're here, Ms. Trish Taylor from the Environmental Protection Agency.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't need to introduce myself now. The mayor just did that for me. My name is Trish Taylor. I'm with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Region 3, which is Virginia. And we're here today to talk to you about what EPA is doing at the Eden, North Carolina coal ash spill. We have a very brief update for you. We're going to try to go through this quickly so we can dedicate most of our time here tonight to Q's and A's. We want to hear your questions and get as many answered as possible. We have two on-scene coordinators here. The on-scene coordinators are first responders for us. We have an EPA, an emergency response program. So when things like this happen, we have somebody who can be sent out and assess the situation almost immediately. So tonight I have two. Kevin Eichender is with Region 4, and he was one of the first on scene. We also have Miles Bartos, who is with Region 3. They both have a little bit of information for you. We'd like you to hold your questions till the end if you can, but if there's something that we're talking about that you'd like to clarify, we can do that. If we go through this quickly, we'll have more time at the end to talk to you, just Q&As, so we'd like to do that. Let me turn to the first page. This is a brief history. Now, I know a lot of you have already been following this since the beginning, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. We want to talk about how we got involved and why and how, so we're going to go through this quickly. We can always come back to this if you want. Kevin, do you mind picking it up from here?
Sure. All right, thanks, Trish. Like Trish said, my name is Kevin Eichinger. I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency out of Atlanta. The release occurred in Region 4. That's why I was one of the first ones notified to respond. So on February, excuse me, on February 3rd, North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources called EPA Region 4 and asked us to respond to assist with this incident. I immediately got on the road and headed this way. We actually, understanding and realizing that this incident was very close to Virginia, we asked for a Region 3 on-scene coordinator to also respond. She was 3 hours away. Chris Wagner responded from 3 hours away, and she was actually the first one on scene initially. What we were advised was somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 tons of coal ash was released into the Dan River by Duke Energy near Eden, North Carolina. Also, as a result of the release, 27 million gallons of the water that sits on that top of that coal ash was also released to the Dan River. Okay, on February 3rd, Duke Energy attempted to install a temporary plug to stop the release. So they were taking emergency response actions to first responder actions to try to stop this release. There was a significant amount of pressure, head pressure, pushing down, and a large volume of ash was releasing out of this 48-inch storm drain line. Because of that pressure, their temporary plug would not hold, and it failed a number of times. They attempted multiple times. On February 8th, a permanent plug was installed. A 27, roughly, estimate 27-foot concrete slurry was pumped into the line and completely sealed and completely stopped the release to the river. This pipe is currently being abandoned in place. They're not going to use it. Right now, there's kind of two phases going on. One of those phases is to completely fill the storm drain line with concrete, overseen, of course, by us and the states and Commonwealth as well. Since February 5th, we've been conducting multiple rounds of sampling, multimedia sampling. I'll introduce Miles Bartos in a little bit, and he'll go into greater detail of this sediment sampling. Well, and I'm going to turn it over to Miles right now. So I'll let Trish introduce Miles.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and introduce Miles. We have this slide because, as you can tell, we are doing our own sampling, but we're not the only ones doing sampling. There's several agencies collecting samples for their own analysis, for their own assessment. So I'm going to go ahead and let Miles introduce the people who are involved in this. A lot of people are here tonight. Good. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure.
Oh, no, you've got a mic.
Not if they want to speak. Oh, great, on microphone. I'm loud. Hi, everyone. I'm Miles Bartos. Some of you may already know me. I do see some friendly faces from Danville and the county that I've worked with before. What I'd like to do now is we have a large cadre of people working together. It's a really good example of how government should work, working together, both grassroots community and also at the federal level. This is just a small sampling of the people that are actually on the team, not only in our proverbial command post, but also we have reach back capability back to the region, to Atlanta, to Philadelphia, and really at any of the specialty resources across the country. So we can build a team that really knows and helps us devise a plan to be protective to human health and the environment. So I'm going to start off. I'm just going to go in order here. We have the Fish and Wildlife Service, Sarah Ward. I'll let her. You get to go first. Congratulations.
So I'm Sarah Ward. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm out of our Raleigh office, but as you know, this event bridges the North Carolina and Virginia border, so we have representatives of our Virginia office here as well. But our role primarily is to help provide, in the near term, technical assistance to EPA regarding sensitive resources at risk in the river. So we've been providing that expertise. We brought our contaminant specialists, endangered species biologists, and GIS experts to the scene to help provide that information to EPA and the responding agencies in a timely manner. We'll continue to help provide that type of information through the remedial phase, but we also have a mission to look at the shorter and longer term impacts to the ecology of the system. So to that end, it's our role to continue to collect samples that help address the ecological impact within the system. We've observed some material overlying the native bottom sediments within the river, and we'll continue to try to assess that into the long term to, in particular, try to determine the effects on some of the sensitive resources that we manage in the public trust, including a federally endangered fish and a federally endangered mussel that are known to occur within the area of this release. So we have also brought a fact sheet with us that provides additional information about our role and our continued role into the future. So we probably don't have quite enough copies, but we'd be happy to put that online so that folks can access it as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up, we have our partners at the state. John Giese with DEQ is our point man that sits next to me in the command post and helps out with issues. I'll let him talk.
John Giese. I'm out of our Richmond office. I manage a program for pollution response at the agency. And as Miles said, I'm the state on-scene coordinator right now. And as the title implies, I do a lot of coordination because we have a lot of people with different skill sets within the agency. And depending on what we're doing at the time, it's necessary to reach out and plug those people in. We also make sure that our other sister agencies, whether it's Game and Inland Fisheries or the Department of Health, are adequately plugged in. And as the emphasis changes from an emergency response to a long-term assessment and remediation, there will be different skill sets that are required. So it's my job to make sure that I'm in communication with those other agencies and in communication with EPA, and that we make sure that the right resources get to the response or to whatever phase of work we're in.
Thanks. Department of Health, we have, John, are you the man now? Is Jeff left, or Jeff's around somewhere?
Jeff's here.
Okay. So John Allbeck, if I said that right, your last name?
Very close.
Okay, very close. I promise before the end I'll get it right.
We'll get it. John Allbach. I'm the director of the Office of Drinking Water. I'm out of Richmond, Virginia, and I'm responsible for the state regulatory oversight and assurance of compliance with state and federal regulations in the Safe Drinking Water Act related to the drinking water quality that comes out of the city of Danville water plant. So I'm focused on the finished water quality that's going in the distribution system to serve all the citizens that are here. Along with me, I have Jeff Wells, who's the director of my Danville Engineering Field Office. He and another engineer, Mike Painter, have been spending a lot of time at the water plants and following this situation. Excuse me. I also have Dan Richardson here this evening, environmental health manager at the local health department, and the medical director, Dr. Herrero, who is here also to participate this evening.
And then with North Carolina, our state to the south, we have Corey Basinger. Oh, sorry.
Good evening. My name is Corey Basinger, and I'm with the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Division of Water Resources out of Winston-Salem. And with me tonight is Sherry Knight over here in the red. She is coordinating our efforts through our Winston office. And also with me here is Diane Reed, who is the chief of our Environmental Sciences branch. Diane is responsible, and her staff are responsible for the data collection and assessing that data. I would echo what the others have said already, in that the state of North Carolina has and will continue to mobilize every possible resource that we have to make sure that we not only protect the public but also our natural resources and get those resources restored to the condition that they were prior to this incident.
Thanks, Corey. So the other participants we have New Jersey, or excuse me, I'm from New Jersey. North Carolina Department of Public Safety, Emergency Management, Dennis, and I'm going to draw a blank for his last name, Hancock, has been helpful. He's been giving us spot-on weather reports so we can ensure the safety of our crews. We know what's coming. We can properly prepare. And, of course, the city of Danville. I am not going to try to reach out and tell everyone that I've talked to that I've known prior to this response or have met during this response. But even just showing that they gave us this venue, they've been a real partner and a real stakeholder in this. And we certainly appreciate that. Of course, Duke Energy, they're part of this. They are the responsible party for it, and they have been working under our supervision and oversight for the response. They're bringing the resources that are doing the actual digging and physical work. We're just kind of the brains of it, monitoring what their progress are on the ground. You want that? I'm sorry. Thank you. Now, this is just a quick list. As I said, we have a lot of other people we're reaching out to. We've been talking to the Army Corps, and it really depends on what area of your responsibilities they are. To give you guys an example, but to help you understand, if you're working at a business, there's different people with billing or accounts receivable and billing or shipping or stock. Everyone has their own area of expertise that you draw upon to make the unit work. And that's basically what we've established here. No one person is an expert, but we reach out because we have access to those experts. And we'll continue to do that as the need arises. So we can go to the next slide. So like I said, I don't want to go into this really super deep because probably everyone's heard the story, right? There's a coal ash pond. There was a pipe in it. The pipe broke, and it blasted stuff into the river, coal ash. And Duke is the guys that did it. So we all know that. What I want to do is give you a couple snapshots of exactly how, little key pieces of what we did, how we did it, and what it looks like. You've all seen the overflights, you've seen diagrams, you've seen charts, you've heard numbers. We're going to kind of bring you in what we're doing so you understand, and we'll show you some data so you understand how to interpret it when we start posting on our website. There's two things in the beginning, what we call in the EPA world the emergency response. This is the thing we come to right away. We say, okay, this is what we have to focus on. There may be a lot of other stuff going on, but the main focus for us was the ER portion. The ER portion, coal ash going into the river. So we focus, where is that coming from? It's the pipe. And I don't know how many people know, and please raise your hand if you need a little clarification, or if I speak too fast. I tend to do that when I get all excited and ramped up. The initial work started at 48-inch pipe. 4-foot pipe, that's a pretty big pipe. A lot of material can come through that. So efforts immediately were made to secure that release. And it started off, and if I can get you to go one more. That's a dam, that's how we started. It looked very basic and rudimentary. I'm just giving you a sneak peek forward as I talk through this, if you can go back to the listing. We're going to talk about what the end game, what we want to do in the very end, how to fix it, secure that that release will never happen again through that pipe. We're going to talk about what we're doing in the river, how to contain some of the areas that we know there's heavier contamination. And we're going to talk about all of our sampling effort, both for the emergency phase, for the immediate protection of your guys' drinking water, and for wildlife in the river and everyone downriver. Talk about those efforts, and then the long-term assessment it's going to take. Remember, there's two phases. That ER phase, like we call it putting the fire out. Firemen come, put water on the fire to cut down on the immediate right then hazard. In the end, there's a lot more work to do afterwards, and that takes a lot of time. So let's go to the map. I don't have a laser pointer, but I'm trying not to touch. Do you have it?
Do you want to use it?
No, I'll just point here a little bit. I made this, there's a touch screen. It's like, I feel like my grandparents trying to look on the computer. This is the pipe that goes across. And at the very bottom there, you see that little dot, that's where the discharge was. So I talked, and I showed you that quick picture of how we basically created a little dam, bunch of sandbags in there, and we had a pump, a sump pump, a heavy-duty sump pump, not the one you'd see in your basement to pump out water. One that can actually pump a good amount of water out. We pumped it up the hill into a basin. From that basin, we pumped it up the hill even farther, because this elevation at this pink line is much higher than the elevation of the river. Pumped it back into the reservoir, the pond. All right? That was our goal, to prevent water going in, cold water from going into the river and causing a continued release. So there's a couple other items I want to show you there. If you see the highlighted orange, that's where they've excavated, because right about where that X is where the break in this 48-inch pipe was. So they have all sorts of equipment. It's, if you're a little kid, it's pretty cool. It's like playing with Tonka trucks. These huge excavators reaching out and pulling dirt, and bulldozers bringing rock in to create this whole infrastructure so we can be protective, but remember, we want to make sure the workers are also safe. So it's a fine line. We want to move really fast. We want to have them do it safely because no one wants to get hurt. So they were digging this big trench, and the idea is to expose that pipe so we can plug it. So we'll go, I don't think there's any other real highlights on this. Actually, no, there is. And I'll talk about the sediment later, but this, you see that little white strip that goes right here? That's where there's some really heavy deposition of the coal ash. Obviously, it blasted out of that pipe, thick, the coal ash dropped down and went right along the banks. Roughly 15 by 75 feet, sometimes 6 feet deep. So that's a lot of stuff right there, right? So what we've done is we've tried to we have some boom around, and we didn't get an update if they got it in the river. They did not. Okay. We're attempting to put a filter barrier around, which will help prevent that from becoming a release point, a source point. Basically putting, a cap on it, containing it. It's not going to be perfect, but that's the next step, to try to isolate that and then ultimately get in and get it out. Basically, the method to get it out is a big vacuum. The best vacuum you can buy, the Dyson on steroids. Again, that is remember I talked about prioritizing, we come in and get the fire. First thing is stop the release. Second thing is to try to get out what could be an additional source material. So that's what they're doing right now, is trying to put this, what we call filter skirt, in around, get a vac truck to pull it out. We talked about health and safety a little bit. The weather coming in, we've got to do that carefully. So they're still actively working on it, and I believe they'll probably continue until the weather says we can't do it anymore. Excuse me while I drink some more water. It is from Danville, in case you're aware. I got out of the faucet just over here. And it's not a circus trick, but it's good. So then we talked about getting that pump. We wanted something better than that little dam with sandbags, right? A sandbag in a 48-inch pipe, it's not going to be very good. So they end up having a team of engineers, a team of environmental folks, and a team of health and safety folks. So how do we do this safely? And what they came up with is plugging the pipe. Now, this concrete pipe at the end of it is concrete. Well, obviously, a concrete pipe is concrete. At the end of the pipe, it's concrete. Up more in the pond, it has some corrugated sections, corrugated metal. But these are slip joint pipes. And you picture, the male and female end. What they had to do is get enough concrete to cover enough of those joints so any water coming down, head pressure, wouldn't blast it out and blast the pipe out. Does everyone understand what I mean about trying to join it? You want enough friction in there and enough concrete that it's not going to blast out in the river and either hurt someone or cause another release or cause a catastrophic release. So they engineered enough. They poured 27 feet of concrete, linear concrete, up the pipe to seal it. Now, a lot of you might ask, how many were going to ask about where the pipes are in there? Hands. Anyone? No one saw the pipes? There we go. Okay. Top of DEQ. So we have that, can you go back, or is that me? Okay. These do a couple things. Number one, one's a vent pipe. It's also a pipe where we pump the grout through. And one's basically a drain, because remember I talked about water coming down that we were collecting, coming through from the pond? Well, if that pushes against concrete that's not set, that can blast the concrete and impair the curing process. So we had to put a drain pipe in to allow the water to come through, which we collected and put it back in the pond until it cured. When it's cured, we put the valve on it, and now that drain pipe is running to a vacuum truck, which is basically a big storage tank on a truck with a vacuum, pumping into a vacuum truck and pumping back up in. Once they start doing the final pump through with the grout in the pipe, it'll fill all the way up, and that pipe will be solid from one end to the other, which is about 1,000 feet total, full of concrete. That is going to permanently seal it, and it's not leaking anymore. So hopefully I've helped describe how those steps, just for that emergency to stop the leak, what's happened on the emergency side phase. Go to the next. And then I just came back to this in case people need it. I'm sorry, can you guys see? Am I jumping in front too much? Shoo me out of the way. I have a thick skin for that. Here's our map of sampling. While that's going on, we have sampling teams out there. And there's actually, I brought my little list here because I can't quite remember everything. Duke Energy, NCD, NC DENR, Virginia DEQ, Virginia Department of Health, Fish and Wildlife, and we have 2 teams of EPA folks sampling a variety of materials. Basically, there's 3 things we're sampling: finished water from the treatment plants, raw water or surface water that's in the water of the river, and then sediment samples, what's in the goop underneath the sitting on the base of the river. You can go back to one more. This map, while it doesn't contain every sampling point, because we're constantly adding as we continue to assess down the river, these represent where the samples have been taken. Roughly, this is the release point down to Danville. Okay, down to Danville, it's about 25 miles of river miles. Okay, so we've collected samples all along there and then farther down. Right now, partially, we're limited by access. So you might notice that in some areas of the river, there's not as high a population of the samples. This is a critical thing that we have to think about. Are we going to waste a whole day trying to get one sample, or are we going to get a whole bunch of samples, a whole bunch of data where we can? And there's a balance between that, because obviously you don't want to get the same samples from the easy spot as time goes, but you do want to get as many samples as you can over a course of time to get a snapshot of what the picture looks like. Everyone follow me? And safety, right. You fall off, we don't want people falling, so there's always that safety component. So these dots will continue to start filling in as we go out in time, and some of them may actually drop off depending upon what we're looking for. Each of these agencies have a slightly different authority that they're actually looking or working under, what they're looking for, what they're looking the data to represent, and how they're going to make a decision based on that data. We're all moving in the same direction, but we have slightly different ways that we can help and enforce. So that's just a sampling map. That's a long-winded way of saying that's everyone. Now, I do have information that our website is live, and we are starting to post data. We have, and now I'm going to talk only for EPA numbers, total samples that we've collected is 122 as of today. Okay? Again, that's of 122. It's a variety of samples from surface water, from finished water, and from sediment. Okay? All for different reasons. The most important to you guys is tap water, what's coming out of your taps, right? I'm assuming most of you have city water. I can't be sure of that, but what's coming out of your tap, we've sampled from what's coming out of the water treatment at the final phase. All of those samples have come back below the maximum contaminant level standards. It's safe. You can drink the water. All right. What I want to do is show you, this is wastewater treatment, or I keep saying wastewater, water treatment plant. We have a bunch of numbers on here that can be confusing. It's very key to know with drinking water, you're not going to see zeros on everything. You're going to see a variety of compounds in water, just like you will in dirt. So you're not going to see zero, but we do have reference number for what's allowed to be consume, and VDH supports it, DEQ supports all those same numbers. They're called MCLs. For drinking water, that's what we're comparing these numbers to. Okay? It's very important because if you're looking at sediments or you're looking at eco risk, those values that you compare to are different. So you want to have the right result, and what you want to know if it's safe compared to the right reference value. On this, and these are all going to be posted on our website as they become validated, but I do want to explain a few of them, a couple of the jargon, if you will, that's on this. Up top, it's very important to read this note. The note basically describes what we're comparing it to and why, or what this sample actually means. Drinking water sample, we're talking about what sort of numbers are it comparing to as far as MCLs, what the units of measure are, parts per million, parts per billion, and that's basically the concentration of that contaminant in the water. And then over here, this is the thing I always love, and I have to go back because I don't have everything memorized. Sometimes you'll see a U or you'll see a J, and what that is a lab qualifier. To sample at these very low levels, we're using very sophisticated, well, the lab is, not myself, we're using very sensitive equipment. And when you get down to the very low levels of the detection, sometimes they'll have a qualifier of a J, like material detected, but may be lower than the result was. It's normal. You're going to find it on all reports if they actually do data validation. Data validation is when some third person, not the guy who did the test, comes in, looks at the data, looks at the calibration curves for the equipment, looks at all the supporting information that says, yes, this number is accurate and represents what's in that sample. So the fact that there are Q's or U's or J's, that's just help explaining the picture. Pictures being a footnote or a reference when you look in a book paints the whole picture of what the sample is. I'm not going to go through each one other than to tell you the drinking water is all below MCLs. Water's good to drink. Yes? Excuse me? Okay, so the question is, what are we actually testing for? Very good question. We are focusing our efforts overwhelmingly on the materials that we would expect, and we have confirmed that we're in the coal ash. So we're focusing primarily on metals. That's things like arsenic. We were looking at, there's some copper, but metals is the primary thing. There are a bunch of other anions like bromide, chloride, things we're looking for, and all that's on here. If you want to meet afterwards, rather than waste time and list all of them now, we can talk afterwards, or you'll be able to see them right up here. We did sample the coal ash to make sure that we weren't missing anything. We did do a radiation survey to make sure there wasn't any radiation issues in the coal ash. But we figure we're focused primarily or solely on what the source material is. That source material is coal ash. We do know in the river there's historical issues from the industries that have been around. We're looking at the effects of this spill on the water both drinking and the ecosystem. So that's what we're focusing on. One more, and then I want to go back. We're going to have a big question and answer at the end of this.
How did the results compare to the city's water before the spill?
Very good. Yes, I'm sorry. The question was, how did the water compare? Now, I'm going to actually go back to you with a question. Do you want to know at the raw water where it goes into the treatment system, or the finished water after they process it? Okay. Finished water is very consistent, and I'm going to is Water Treatment Authority, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. Barry, you can speak to this even better. I know raw water coming in was elevated in the beginning. The question is, how does the water compare pre-spill versus post-spill?
Well, the raw water, if you will, it tests pretty much all the other test results that have been coming in from initially, I guess it was Duke Energy. So they picked up some concentrations of the metals in the river. In the finished water, we didn't have any that were above any of the drinking water limits at all. We removed it all in the treatment process. But all of the results have been very, very comparable. We've actually collected some samples, and there's been as many as, I guess, 4 different laboratories running analyses. And to date, all those analyses are running, like you say, pretty much the same.
Yep. And very similar to pre. The raw waters were much more affected. Okay, there is variation in river water day to day, not violent swings, and we still have our validated data is still coming in, so we won't see much trends, but it's been consistent and below MCLs. I don't have specific numbers off the top of my head. If you'd like, we can certainly talk afterwards, and the data is going to be public, so you can look at it. We actually have collected from DEQ and VDH historical data. The water treatment facilities have to sample annually, and I'm right on that, right? It's an annual compliance. So we have that historical data. We also have from December historical data at the raw input, so we know what was going in to be able to compare. And it's a challenge for us because we know there's other stuff in the river that's independent of this spill. So we have to be able to separate that out in our response for this incident. We are looking at it, we're focusing on it, and we're trying to look at the whole data too. So I can't tell you one number. It was 1 now and 1 before and 1.2 afterwards, but it was very consistent. And as Barry said, all the response agencies that have been doing sampling, we do it independently for that reason to make sure, like, hey, this lab is a good lab. They're all accredited labs. Even Duke is using accredited labs. They're good labs. But all the other agencies that have sampled, our results are very consistent. Does that get closer to the answer? I know you probably want specific numbers, right? Good? Okay. I'm sorry, that keeps going up. Surface water. Okay, so we have surface water. We have 2 samples here. We have one above where the discharge was. It's a good, so if you're going downstream and the release was here, we have a sample up here, and we have a sample below that was taken on. I believe these will be on the same day. Yes, they were. About an hour and 15 minutes apart. So that's going to give us a really nice, kind of speaking to your question, it was upstream where the release couldn't get to it because release is not going to go up. We're going to see what the numbers are. And in this case, I'm going to, 25, the numbers are darn straight. Above the discharge was 0.6 on barium difference. There really wasn't much difference at all. Iron was a little bit higher. Copper was higher. Copper went from 1 to 5.4, still below MCL. You could drink, those would meet drinking water standards, untreated water in the river. Again, not zero. There was an increase, without a doubt, but it was still below what drinking water standard limits would be. So good.
For these particular...
For these particular ones, right, for these samples.
Because you didn't test everything.
I didn't want to go through tonight and try to go through each data point. I wanted to basically show you how to read, not show you how to read it, but help you understand what all this means and give you, when you're looking on the website and you see all the data we're going to start putting up as we get it validated. We're trying to get 48-hour turnaround on the validation, but then we want to double check it again. There's nothing worse, than having something wrong up there. You try to do your best. But we want to get it out to you as fast as we can. So it'll be coming up after we can talk more one-on-one if you want, and we'll have, obviously, our contact information. We're not going anywhere for a while.
Miles, I know you're
yes, sir.
Trying to move on and get to the end of this.
Oh, I really should have.
I think I have the information here that you're asking for, the raw water metals analysis before this incident, and I have a raw water metals analysis after this incident. So I can show that.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's Jeff Wells with Virginia Department of Health. He has raw water data before the incident. Okay, river water, surface water is coming in the river that could be going into the treatment system, and data, raw water data after the incident.
Right. Metals analysis.
Metals analysis.
Is that on EPA side or is that on the Virginia, we have that in our files. The city of Danville also has those results.
But it will be on the EPA side. Where can we go to get information so we don't have to go all over Virginia?
We'll probably, the question is where the data will be on one site so you don't have to go everywhere to find it. Good question. That's probably logistical. We do have many of our sites. We're referencing other agencies' fact sheets to try to have one-stop shopping. See me after, and we'll figure out how we can do that if we can get links to other people's data onto our website. Because that would make it a lot easier for sure.
We are going to try to include other agencies' websites, live links on our website, so you can just click on it and go straight to their page. You don't have to search for it.
And quite frankly, there may have been someone, like I said, our focus, what we're looking for. I'm certainly here because this is an area that I work in as an OSC, so I want to reach out to the people. But when we're worrying about sampling and getting data, I'm not always thinking about the technical, how to put the websites together. But there probably is someone out there in the command center that's already thinking about that, but they want us to focus on the response portion of it. So I think Kevin's writing it down right now. I'm sure there's going to be progress on it. All right, so we talked about what the next steps are. And basically, the initial response phase is what we want to get completed now, and that's the plugging of that pipe and that removal of the coal ash that's right outside the pipe that flowed out, that we're putting that skirt around where we can vacuum out. Once that's done, we're going to consider that our emergency response phase is done, and now we're going to phase solely on the long-term cleanup, assessment and cleanup of the river. And again, that's when we're going to put together a team, many of the same people, to come together and look at it from whatever angles that particular agency and their authorities within that agency allows them to help assess it and see what cleanup needs to be. And there's going to be a lot of tough choices with that, of how to do it, Where can we do it? Where do we find it? We're still going to be modeling, excuse me, where all of the sediments visually are, not only through samples, but through rolling down the river and literally looking for it. We have experts that can tell us where the river would normally deposit these sort of materials, and we'll have to verify it by actually having eyes on it. Part of that, we'd certainly love to, if you guys know you have a fishing hole or kayaking and you know where you see, tell someone so it can get up to us. That helps us with the assessment. I don't think you're going to go swimming in the river today because it's a little on the chilly side. But you guys, if you've been on the river, you know better than us. Not that we're not going to be out there, but we'd look for any information you have. That's something we would want. We've gone 25 miles so far, and I think Kevin acknowledged it that we're even going farther, continuing down to mile 40 or so, at least for now. It's our next phase, looking for where it is. We're going to continue the sampling at the treatment plants for now. Then we're going to reevaluate once all that release area is secured, and we're going to look for when there's significant rain events. Rain may kick up some of the sediments that has fallen out, and we may find it farther down. So we have to constantly evaluate. And I hate saying I make the joke because I certainly don't look like a Marine, but I'm like a Marine. Well, I'll adapt, and that's what we'll do with the river and the assessment. It's not just a simple prescriptive step 1, 2, and 3. It's a lot of do step 1, step 2. Let's reevaluate, see what our data is, and maybe we have to turn left or turn right. Certainly, I want to wrap this up so we can go to the discussion phase rather than me keep rambling. But it'll be a long process. We're going to continue to gather the data as necessary. We'll make changes based on what the data is telling us and what the visual assessments are. And we'll have a lot of the same smart people helping ensure that the river and the public health is protected. That being said, I'm going to close up saying drinking water is fine. You can drink the water. There are some advisories about actually physically touching the coal ash, that you may get rashes. And the Department of Health can I think it's your fact sheet that's posted on our website, can talk about that. To take it away from coal ash, when I talk to other people about soil being contaminated in this old dump, and we talk about what the risk level is and what's in the soil and it's bad stuff. And the general rule of thumb that I say is, well, don't eat the dirt and you're going to be okay. Now, that's oversimplifying it, but with a little bit of common sense and a little bit of you don't go down and reach and grab the coal ash and try to eat it, you are very protected. You can walk along the river walk. You can do all that sort of stuff. I met with the council members before, and they asked, can you go swimming? Would you be afraid to swim in the river? And I said, for me, as long as I know how to swim. Again, it's oversimplifying it. I'm trying to give you guys not to have fear, just have an understanding of what actually is in the river, and we're assessing it. You're going to see probably a bathtub ring as the river recedes. You'll see the coal ash along the sides. It's not going to hurt you to walk by that. But we're continuing to assess it. And that, in the end, I will. These are some online resources we have. We don't have our.
Yes, we do.
We do. Oh, that's the. Okay, so this first one, anyone with the smartphones, you can type that in, and we're going to have our data sets public on there. Every day you're going to see more. Remember I told you we have to go through and make sure that data is good. That takes a couple days. We're trying 48 hours to get it around, and then it gets routed. We have to make sure that any of these explanations, if there's an anomaly, that we identify and discuss it to try to explain it. Looking at raw data can be confusing, but you can go on there and you can start getting EPA's data. With that, I'll turn it back over to Trish for some open Q&A.
Okay,
Thank you very much for your time.
I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions. Thank you, Miles. That was very, very helpful information. Thank you, Kevin, for starting us off and giving us how we got here. I appreciate that. Let's start with questions. Yes, sir. Could you? Yes, please.
Yes. My name is Frank Holloman, and I'm with the Southern Environmental Law Center.
Could you hold on a minute?
Yes. My name is Frank Holloman. I'm with the Southern Environmental Law Center, and we've been working to clean up coal ash across the southeast, including in North Carolina. And I have a question. First of all, I want to thank the EPA for all the hard work you're doing to respond.
Good favor. Thank everyone that's helped, because it's not just us.
To respond to this. But I have a question about the beginning of the presentation and at the end. At your timeline, at the beginning, it began with February 2014. But what it didn't mention is August 2013. In August 2013, the North Carolina Department of the Environment and Natural Resources determined that Duke Energy was violating federal and state clean water laws at this very location by contaminating groundwater with arsenic, antimony, boron, and other substances, and by discharging illegally directly into the river contaminated coal ash discharges. And then at the end, but wait, if I could, but nothing was done in the intervening time until this catastrophe to correct that problem. After the catastrophe is over, at the end of the day, that problem is still going to be there because you've still got unlined pits in the ground containing coal ash with toxic substances with a dike that leaks apart from this problem. What we like to do is focus on preventing the problems in the future so you guys will never have to do this job again. So I guess our question is, are you all going to require Duke Energy to make this an example, remove this contaminated coal ash from this unlined hole in the ground, and put it in a dry line landfill just like all of us have to use for our kitchen waste?
Do you want to go ahead?
There's a lot of questions in that question, and we want to try to answer them. You first asked about the August 2013, and this timeline highlights EPA's involvement for this incident. So obviously we were talking about this specific spill in the timeline. We know there's a history, and we know that Duke has had some issues, and we also know that the state has been watching them, and we will probably not be, we're not going to talk too much on policy and lawsuits and things like that because we're on-scene coordinators, so these guys are actually your technical experts. So if you're looking for an answer when it comes to policies or rulemaking or something like that, we're not going to be able to answer that tonight. But we do have your questions, and it's going to be something that we can address with our website because we're going to be doing updates as much as we can with new information to get the questions that you have, the ones that we can't answer now, we want to answer, and we want to put it online so people can see, what the concerns are and what our answers are. Was there a third part to that question? Did we get?
I guess the main thing is, are you going to require them to clean up the coal ash illegally polluting anyway? And the storage method that resulted in this catastrophe so it would be an example for all the other locations on this same river, by the way.
Okay.
Not the only one.
So you're mentioning other coal ash ponds.
Are we going to require this pond to remove its coal ash the same secure
Okay.
laboratory just like a municipal garbage?
Okay, so you are talking about the long-term cleanup remedy for this particular facility. And again, we do have the experts here that are doing the emergency response, but we also have the experts here talking about the long-term cleanup of the river, and that is going to be part of that evaluation, what to do with the remaining coal ash. That's going to be part of the assessment for the long term. Yes, sir? In the blue jacket?
modeling where this ash may have gone downstream. number, a volume number of the amount of stuff that came out of the pipe to begin with, in order to input that into the model to get an accurate picture? And then I think related to that, in traveling the length of this pond in a kayak, there are two pretty heavy discharges at either end of the ash ponds along the river. And as I was one of the downstream discharge is, where it's supposed to come out. The other one on the other upstream end of the ash pond, lots of red, very red rocks, slimy, and a very heavy discharge coming out of there. And I'm curious where that's coming from, and if that is contributing to the problem, to the contamination. Like, is that number of volume of stuff that came out of this ash pond, is that still increasing because of whatever that is coming out of that discharge?
Okay, I'm going to try to repeat that question. I heard two questions. The first one was about our modeling method for cleanup assessment along the river, and you want to know if we're using the total amount of coal ash released into the river to help figure out where it's going to deposit as we assess the river.
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering
If we know the total of coal ash deposited into the river. That is something that we can answer. Do we have the...
So I can. So the total number. So the original estimate is still 50 to 82,000 tons of material and 27 million gallons of ash water. We focus on the emergency response phase and getting the assuring public health and then getting that line plugged. The total amount is secondary, and Duke Energy has brought in a third-party engineering firm who they knew exactly how much was in the pond before the release happened. They brought in a third-party engineering firm who was doing the assessment to determine a more accurate amount that was released, including what continued the release after that initial 50 to 82,000 estimate came in. That plan is stamped by an engineer, by a professional engineer. It's third party. We're waiting on those results. Once those numbers come in, we'll update our model. Now, models are just models. They're a place to start. They're not. You always ground truth a model. So how we're ground truthing the model is by doing physical assessment. We have crews on the river who are looking for the ash. They'll pull a sample. Is the ash there? Then once they find the ash, they then pull a sediment sample to see what's in there. And they're moving, like Miles said, we started at what we call River Mile 0, which is the release point. From there, we've done this assessment up to River Mile 25, which is the dam just before Danville. And I've learned a whole bunch about your river in this short period of time. One thing I say, your river walk is beautiful. Now we're going from River Mile 25 to River Mile 40, which is the South Boston water treatment facility, and doing that same type of assessment. So we use the model to help guide, but we ground truth it with the actual data. And the exact amount to us, is really immaterial because we want to find it and test it and get it out. It's an important number, no doubt. It is a very important number, but we don't focus on that number because we want to find what's in the river, and is it causing an issue, whether it's 100 pounds or 100,000 pounds. We want to find it in the river, is it causing a problem, and take care of it. So hopefully Duke will release their updated numbers soon. We're in constant conversation about that. We want that data as well. I'm sure that once they have it, it'll be released. Again, it's a third-party engineering company who's providing that data, and we'll go from there. Did I answer your question completely? So, what am I doing something?
Might be me getting too close to the other mic too.
Oh, that one? Okay. So this, and as Duke has released in their press releases, but this facility was being closed down, okay? They were decommissioning the facility. As part of their process to decommission the facility, no ash production into that facility stopped. And they had an assessment done to determine that exact volume that they were then using in their plans to address the ash pile as part of their closure plan. So they have accurate engineered stamped numbers that show exactly how much was in it, and now they're doing it again, and we should have an exact volume. We're waiting on Duke to release that data because they're ground truthing it as well. They want this, waiting for the engineer to come back and say what it is. And again, it's third party, it's stamped, which is, for the engineers, it's kind of an important thing. So yes. To answer everybody's questions? Oh, so what was the second part? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. The second part was you were asking about some sediment that you saw on rocks, correct? You actually saw some physical. A very.
For 4 days, we've been by it on the river, it's constantly discharging down a bunch of very bright orange red rocks that are very slimy, as if there's a lot of iron.
Okay, so you're seeing a discharge, a very slimy red discharge for the past 4 days, and you're wondering if that's associated with this spill and what it is. And okay.
That's part of our assessment. That area is part of our assessment, and we'll try to determine exactly what that is and see if it impacts and if it causes a risk to human health and the environment. So yes, we will address that area and determine under this action. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, but could you stand up, please? Thank you. It helps. Thank you. I'm going to repeat the question. You asked how often is the water being sampled at the tap? Are you referring to in general or post-treatment process? Are you referring to after the spill or just in general? Are you talking about how often do you test at the after treatment? How often is EPA testing the post-treated drinking water?
For EPA specifically, we are testing every day. Now, it hasn't been every day because if it's not running, we haven't tested it. Okay, there's a couple times on the weekend, and Barry and the crews down in Clarksville.
Are they using your stuff because they had mentioned before that we don't have those capabilities?
We are using we have 2 sampling teams that are going, and they're independent teams, but one's a contractor, one's an EPA employee. They're both going and collecting samples for the heavy metals. Pre-filter, like raw coming in, and then the tap. And we're trying to get to them, the Danville and South Boston, every day. Now again, it hasn't been every day, but we've had several samples, and they're going to be on the website as soon as they get. Generally, we have a rush on them, so we're getting 24-hour turnaround for basic data, okay? Then we have to evaluate it and make sure it's data qualified. That takes another approximately 24 hours. Then for us to take that still raw data and get it into a usable, readable format, something similar to that, it generally takes another day, 2 or 3 days. But we have the initial data right away. If there was a problem, we saw a problem, we would go out really fast and say, hey, Barry, we might want to look at this, but we haven't had that. So there's a delay in you guys maybe getting it because we want to make sure that data is as accurate as possible.
For us to be able to do it on the site, we're looking at a possible 48-hour turnaround before we can actually view the results on your website then.
It'll probably be actually even more. We just started putting up stuff today by the time headquarters built our website up, and the train of people that look at it as it's going up. So it'll be more than 48 hours from the day if we sample today, you're not going to see it in 48 hours. Okay? I can tell you it's flatline for what's going out to your tap. There's no concerns. We haven't seen any spikes. We are going to be even more diligent because we will eventually start cutting down once we see, hey, there's no issue. And that stuff in the river I talked about, once that's out, that big chunk of it, we'll probably slow our sampling down and use our resources for the ecological side and assess the whole river. However, when we do have those rainstorms or rain events or something that could change it, we're going to look, and we know with the water treatment how long the water takes to get to the water treatment. So there's a release here now. It may take 24 hours or 72 hours to get to the affected plant. We know that data, and we'll adjust our sample to make sure it's staying protected. So there's a lot of thought in it.
The one other question that I had was, you're talking about asking people to let you know where the river might deposit these. Is there an email address or a phone number that people can call and actually give you guys suggestions where these deposits happen? Basically, what we're looking at is most of the people that I'm talking to and most of the people that are trying to get their voice heard want this stuff cleaned up. So I'm sure that many people, actually some have asked me how to volunteer. If you can put up any kind of contact information like an email address,
Mm-hmm.
Trish's and Angela's.
Yes.
I can let me
Yeah.
that question. It was because we had asked for any information that you may have about river quality issues that you see, and you know you want to report them to us. How to do that? We just set up the website that we referenced, so it's brand new. We're going to be populating that with a lot of information. What I can do is see if maybe we can build in a comment box to see if you would like to do that.
So we actually do have our contact information on there.
Okay.
Both Trish, we're the lucky ones, Trish, Angela, and I believe our names are on there.
I don't know our name. We haven't introduced Angela Miller.
Yes.
She's another one. In fact, she's one of our other public information folks, and she's been helping support this event. So I checked the website when it went live. Trish's email, Angela's email were on there.
Oh, good.
And I didn't check there was during the test phase of the website, there was a comment box, but really the best thing to do is to get into their email, because they're other than emailing us, they're a direct link to us.
And I would like to add one thing to that also. We would like to do something like this again. This is our first time out talking to people one-on-one, and if we could, well, obviously we're going to talk to the city of Danville to see if they'll let us use the facility again. But if this is a forum that works for you and you'd like us to come back out later on in the process when we have more information, we could do something like this again. We do plan on doing this for other communities. We would like to do it for Eden next week. We were going to try to do it tomorrow, but of course the snow has, stopped that. So next Wednesday we will be in Eden to do the same thing, gather questions and information, and hopefully South Boston as well next week. So forums like this we would like to continue. And, I'm sorry, I wanted to say something.
Sorry. I just wanted to, it is live. I just wanted to follow up to your drinking water question, ma'am. The health department, my engineers took samples from the distribution system on Friday. We got those results back from the state laboratory in Richmond on Monday, and we do have those here this evening if you'd like to see them.
Yes, sir. Oh, go ahead. Yes, ma'am. That's a good question. I'm going to repeat it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so there were three really good questions, and the first question was about the ash pond, the remaining ash in the ash pond that leaked, and why is that not part of the initial emergency response? And I think that we can talk about that if you want me to turn it over. Then we'll get to your other questions one at a time.
So the reason why, and I know you can't, the reason why it's currently, there's no water on it is because, let me move this. We currently have a large number of people in this area working because they want to fill this entire line with concrete. Okay, so I can't have any water in there. I got to keep it dewatered until this work is done. Once the work is done, the water will be retained. The ash is currently wet. There's no water on top of it. The ash is wet, so that. And these are great questions, and we don't have the specific answers. Then we're part of the emergency response phase. Very good question. I'm asking that question myself, as well as the questions you answered. She asked, "Isn't it a good time to take it out?" These are questions I can't answer. It's a good question. The question, what you said is they're the same questions I have. I just don't have those answers. We do have the contact folks for those people at the EPA. And, I'm sure you're talking to those folks already, but I wish I could answer that question, but I just don't have that information. But it is, it is not part of the emergency response. Correct.
Just to follow up on it, Jen, remember I talked, we do the fire and we focused on getting that out. For us, all of our forces are to stop any release. We do the stabilization. For lack of a better term, we put the Band-Aid on the wound to keep it protected. In the long term, down the road is when we look at the other options and what the final layout will be. And it's not only for coal ash. We do this if there's lead in soil or there's something in drinking water. Anything we look at, we do that initial phase, and that's where our focus is. The removal is more long term if they're going to actually ever move the coal ash. And well, we wouldn't want to divert resources from collecting it or stopping the leak by moving it first. So it's just a matter of prioritizing. It's not that it's off of our radar, but our priorities was stopping that leak and preventing the conduit that allowed the leak from leaking again. So it's not that we're not thinking about it, it's just, or don't have those same questions.
And the question, she has two more. The question about the 36-inch line, if we could hold it up. So the 36-inch line. So part of this whole assessment, we have a little camera on wheels, remote control, that gave us a lot of intel on this line. That camera has gone down this 36-inch line and assessed that. One of the problems you got to understand is this, and then around the pond, that's the primary way that stormwater drains from the site. Okay, by taking this 46-inch line out, we've greatly impacted the way stormwater moves. To account for that, they have installed piping to kind of pump this around pump stormwater around, because we don't want stormwater washing across this basin. The overall plan, what's going to happen to this 36-inch line, hasn't been determined yet. However, if we were to go ahead and plug it right now, we've cameraed it, we know it's intact. If I was to plug it right now and we get a large rain event, it could create another release. So the final plans haven't been determined for that, but that's why we haven't plugged it. Because if it does rain, I got to have a way for that stormwater to get to where it goes. Does that answer? Yeah. So structurally, they've run a camera up it. The future of it is still to be determined. The
third one was, why was there no postage signage on the river when the spill first occurred, day one and day two? Why was there no notification that it could be a potentially hazardous situation for people to be down there? Who do we have for that?
I don't know if we actually have anyone that would really answer that. What I would say is that will be certainly a lesson learned, something to think about. We do the best we can. We're never going to be perfect. We can't change what happened in the past, but we can learn from it and we can move forward and do it better next time. That's the best answer I'd have for you.
That's actually a very good question because that's something that I think a lot of people would be interested in, and that is something that we could address on our website when we go back and get more information. Basically, who's responsible for notifying the public that an area may not be safe for them to be. We'll address that. We'll get some answers for that. Yes, sir.
My name is Dean Adams. I'm with the Acton River Keeper. We have 3 high hazard coal ash ponds in the Acton River system to play out anywhere in North Carolina. And I understand your focus is on public health and immediate drinking water. But really the big public health issue long term is fish and fish consumption. And the Clean Water Act gives all Americans a right to fishable, swimmable waters, and Duke Power has stolen that from everybody here. So what is Duke Power going to do? Because I don't expect this burden to fall necessarily on you. What is Duke Power going to do? Is there going to be long-term fish consumption and fish testing? Is there going to be fish consumption advisories posted? Because that is a real long-term public health risk. And long after you're gone, those contaminants aren't going to be there. Even the best cleanup we can possibly do is not going to rectify that. Eating that fish, and we see it play out all over the country. So I want to know, what is Duke Power going to do to help provide those fish consumption advisors and actually give back and make sure that we have fishable, simple water that's required under the Clean Water Act?
I'll repeat it. I'm going to go ahead and repeat the question. He's asking about the quality of the river, long-term quality of the river, especially the fish advisories. When can we start fishing again? When are you going to be able to? Was there more? I want to make sure I'm catching. Okay, so fish advisories.
It's long-term bioaccumulation, bioamplification of these, toxins going up into the food chain.
Okay.
Many years long after you're gone, this is going to become a bigger issue. And, that's when everybody starts looking away from this issue. But the reality is that's going to be the bigger public health issue.
So your question is for long-term cleanup goals and river quality, especially fish advisories and fish consumption. What are we going to make Duke? What are we going to make Duke do about it? That was the question. Okay. I want to make sure I got the question right before we answer it, because we can't answer that.
Actually, probably have 3 people that will be able to help at least partially answer the question. Of course, the crystal ball is what to make Duke do. That's going to be happening down the road. But to speak to the beginning part, I'm going to start with John with VDH, who may pass it along to the gentleman to his right. And I told you I was going to forget names. Just meant tonight. Dan Richardson. Can you speak to any of that as far as the fish advisories?
There is currently a fish advisory downstream from Danville, but not one upstream from Danville. And we don't have any data on whether or not this has affected the fish. The information that I've been given is it's going to take a while for any of the metals to be assimilated into the fish flesh. I can't tell you it either way right now. It would be inappropriate for me to say either way about consuming the fish upstream. Downstream, there is currently an advisory. It has to do with mercury and PCBs. It's on our website. It tells you specifically what size fish you should be avoiding and how often you should be eating certain meals of fish per month. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Dan Richardson, Environmental Health Manager.
And then I'm going to ask Diane with NC North Carolina to chime in a little bit.
Thank you. I'm Diane Reed. I'm with the Division of Water Resources in North Carolina. We are working with our state epidemiologists to develop a plan for the fish sampling. We don't expect to see anything right away. We do have some background data. It's I think it was from 1999. We have a station upstream at the Virginia line, and we have a station that is down further into North Carolina before you get to Eden. So we do have some background data in there, and we will be doing monitoring. We're gonna do some initial monitoring, and then we'll be doing ongoing monitoring. Who's trying to?
Can I just want to say that Virginia DEQ has basically an analogous program, and we check fish tissue in various places around the state, and we feed that information to the health department, and those are the data that they use to determine whether or not a health advisory is needed. I agree with you. It's not going to be a short-term thing. If there's an issue, it'll be a longer term. We actually are going to go out probably next week and start trying to collect some fish in the Virginia portion of it, but there is a routine process that we have in Virginia to try to get information to the health department so they can determine if advisories are needed.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just add a little bit more to that, because you had specifically said, what are you going to make Duke do about it? Duke is responsible for this incident, and they're being held accountable. The long-term cleanup assessment and evaluation that is going to be the next phase after the emergency phase is really about what's in the river. Has it had an impact on human health and the environment? What is that impact? How do we clean it up best? They're going to be held accountable for that cleanup, whatever it may be in the long term. So they're going to be addressing the long-term quality. I'm just going to repeat the point that he wanted to make. He wanted to make the point that the signage for fish advisories along the river aren't there, and that the counties don't necessarily have the resources to address it. So that it sounds like you're suggesting that Duke be responsible for posting signage about fish advisories and assessing. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'm going to repeat your question. You said that you had noticed that there had been an impact to turtle, the health of turtles along the riverbank, and you're wondering if that is in fact part of the spill, an impact of the spill. How can it not then be an impact to human health? And we do have people here from the Fish and Wildlife Service to talk about the impact to wildlife and what that may or may not mean and what they have found so far. Is that okay if we pass it on?
So I'm Sarah Ward with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and your concern is near and dear to our hearts. We were out on the river as early as we could be to start looking for any direct mortality or any other obvious signs of environmental health impairment out on the river. We have not seen any mortality events to date, and we're always anxious to hear about them. So as you provide that information to EPA, we're working directly with EPA, so that would be helpful to us. But I would like to say that the absence of information about biological impacts at this time doesn't mean that they're not occurring. As you heard our EPA colleagues mention tonight, the data coming in terms of biological effects is limited because the focus necessarily of an emergency response up until this point has been human health. The Fish and Wildlife Service has a little bit more bandwidth because that's our role on these. So we have had people on the water daily since we have been able to secure boats to get out on the river. We've had folks out since last Wednesday assessing the conditions, trying to do reconnaissance for some of that overlying coal ash material over the sediments, because that's a keen interest of ours as well. Several of the resources that we manage in the public trust reside and utilize the sediment habitats, the sediment-associated and bottom habitats to survive. And so any of that burial effect is real, and whether or not we can physically see it on the surface right now doesn't mean it's not happening. There could be physical abrasion to gill surfaces and things like that that we are keen on getting the answers to, and we'll be developing the sampling and data collection plans to do that. But any direct mortality that you all are seeing, please report through this website, and that information will get to us as well, because we're anxious to hear that. We are not aware at this time of any fish kills or any other mortality events to date. So, thank you. Well, and that is a hypothetical, but we certainly we have experts. I'm a toxicologist, and we have colleagues who have responded to coal ash spills before, so we are familiar with the types of toxicological effects you may see with wildlife. And I know that our colleagues who work with the human health are addressing that as well. I'll let them speak to the human health because I'm an ecologist and a toxicologist, an ecotoxicologist. So I address the sensitivity of the critters essentially to toxicants. We don't do the human side of it, but obviously there's a body of literature, and I think part of what will be meaningful to us is learning more about the source material at this site, because that will help us better put into context the body of literature and information that we're aware of from other sites.
We can address that a little bit. We have folks here from the Virginia Department of Health, and if they could speak a little bit about exposure pathways to address that question. Do we have someone from Department of Health? Do we have someone from Department of Health?
I'm with the health department, but I'm not sure I know the answer to the question.
Exposure pathways as far as, her question was about not impact humans, and I didn't know if you wanted to talk about how humans are exposed and exposure pathways that are for coal ash.
Thank you. Well, the exposure that humans are getting in terms of drinking water seems to be in terms of touching the coal ash or coming in contact with it. I think our advisory on the website, coal ash itself is the residue from when the coal is burned. That usually is a silicaceous substance. And so you're talking about something that's rather abrasive, something like sand, glass. That is from what we can see the danger that I understand right now. I'm not an expert in coal ash, and I can't tell you what other issues there may be with it. But stay out of contact with it if you're worried about anything else. The drinking water's been handled.
Tight up here. I'll follow up on the, hi. I'll follow, you've been doing that all day, so he's got a smile for you, don't I? I'll follow up on the drinking water aspect. Who asked the question? I have my back to you, I'm sorry. Okay. The drinking water standards, the max contaminant levels that were shown up here and Miles had addressed earlier, those were established through research years ago for the impact on human health for chromium, cadmium, arsenic, lead, mercury, zinc, those things. That's why we routinely test for those. The City of Danville Water is checked every year for those kind of heavy metals. They'll continue to be checked annually. I suspect they'll be checked more often now. They already have been. So, irregardless of the coal ash spill, we're very interested in those kind of heavy metals on a day-to-day basis in all my water supplies across Virginia, approximately 2,800 of them. So the standards that are set, the maximum contaminant levels, are actually more restrictive than the levels that impact human health. There's a safety factor there. So I'm not an individual who can speak to the aquatic life. They have a different set of standards. My focus is on drinking water, and the contaminant levels that are in there, the concentrations of those contaminants will not impact human health.
There have been several hands up for a long period of time, so let me go to this woman and to this woman and then to this gentleman. He's been there, and then we'll go from there because I know you all have really good questions, and we're going to try to get to everybody. If we're allowed to stay past 8, if they let us stay here past 8, we will. I think they'll let us. I hope so. Ma'am, what was your question? On the side? That's okay. That's good. That's two questions in one. The first one was, EPA is here to address the immediate response, but who's going to, from the city of Danville, who is going to be involved with this process once we leave, and who's here obviously involved now currently with the city? And the second question was, how can students and other people get involved in the long-term cleanup? So we can address that.
In the beginning, I'm what's called an on-scene coordinator, and what we do is a lot of planning for emergency situations just like this. There's people in this room that I've met through that. He's hiding behind there, but there's a Mike Guzzo with the Department of Emergency Management, Steve Dishman with there he is over there. We meet on a regular basis, so we've built those relationships. So when I'm showing up to something like this, we're not introducing, shaking hands for the first time. So I'm not going anywhere. All right, I'm going to be here, and I have backups and other colleagues that come down routinely to these areas, to Roanoke, to Danville, to Bassett, to do, if there is a response or needs to be a cleanup or doing a evaluation for removal. So we'll be here, and we already know some of the players in the area, and of course our state partners with DEQ, DEH, we already know each other already. So the structure's already in place. It's not like I'm stationed here. My home's back north of Philadelphia, but I spend a lot of my time here. It's good for me, good for my bosses, because I don't like being in the office. They all appreciate when I'm out. So from that point, you're going to have a familiar face, and I'm not going to be here every day of every week of every month of every year, but I am here routinely. I'm only a phone call away. I also have one of my backups here. She's hiding in the corner. Stephanie Wenning is another on-scene coordinator who comes down and helps out. So from that point of view, we'll be involved as long as whatever the response is down the road is within our authorities, but we'll still be planning. Even if we're not doing physical stuff in the river, we'll still be involved. That answers the first part. As far as the college, I don't have a good answer for you. Certainly, I can give you my email and phone number, and we love the idea that we have college students that want to get involved and understand cleanup. I mean, that's great. So I don't have anything off the top of my head as far as volunteering, because there are other rules about letting people that don't have the right training on to certain sites when you're around equipment or health and safety type stuff that OSHA makes us required to have. But I'd be glad to talk to you afterwards just about opportunities for volunteering or just even information transfer.
Okay, yes. Over here, and then we're going to go back over here. We're going to try to get everybody's got good questions. The Washington Post about North Carolina not regulating the company. Is that the reference? And what would EPA do? What is the role of EPA's oversight to the states in their regulatory duties?
Responders to emergencies, so I can't answer that one. It's a good point. I encourage you, to bring it up through local politicians, through your senators, through your representatives, U.S. and state senators. And address. One of the things we're trying to get up on our website is the link to the EPA personnel who are directly involved in the coal ash issue. Because, I'm an emergency responder. One day I'm cleaning up a tanker truck that's wrecked somewhere, and the next here. So I can't answer that. I apologize. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I saw you getting a little angry, so I'm glad you waited. Thank you. It's a good question. I'm sorry. So, as Mal alluded to earlier, as the coal ash went down, I'm sorry. Repeat the question. You told me that, didn't you? I don't listen to her well enough sometimes. It usually gets me in trouble. What about the exposed coal ash on the banks of the river? Is that an issue when it dries out? So what happened? You had the heavier material, the heavier parts of coal ash. It sank, right? But then you had this lighter fines that moved down the river, and they created a bathtub effect. That's what we want to get out. That's this material we want to remove, because you're right. As it dries out, coal ash has the contaminants in it that you all probably read and saw about. It also has silica in it, which, think about somebody who's cutting a concrete block, and all that dump that comes up. That's not good for people to breathe. So that's part of our assessment, is to find where these materials are, get those recoverable materials out, and because, yes, they do represent a inhalation issue, and that's part of our response. Okay, I don't want to take the lead.
Yeah, thank you for being patient. Very patient gentleman, sir. You've had your hand up forever. You did. You both did. Fight it out amongst yourselves. The question is about private drinking wells. You have a well that is located very close to the river, about 200 yards from the river, and you're wondering if your private well could be impacted from this. Who do we have for a private well?
I can, yeah. Generally, we would not expect there be an issue with the interface from the river to your water. My understanding is that Duke had agreed at their last public meeting that they're going to be doing sampling. We will continue to evaluate with all our partners to see if there is a need for us to do sampling or verify Duke sampling. That's the short. Well, it's always and I'm going to let the VDH tag on this. I know from Pennsylvania, it's always recommended. I have a well, I test my well, because you never know what's there. It may not be anything with the coal ash. It's always a good idea to test your well to make sure it's clean. That's independent of this. That was one of the easier, shorter questions and answers. I don't know if I got. Does the Department of Health have any comment? Sure. You're half standing up, so I had to.
If you're going to look for testing in the future, then you should have background testing to balance and review those results against. Do you know how deep your well is?
It's about 225 feet deep. They struck water at about 70 feet.
Okay. I mean, realistically, you should not be getting an impact from the river 600 feet away from it at that depth. If by some chance that water is flowing in that direction, you have a lot of natural soil medium that water is flowing through, which essentially replicates a filtration plant. The sand and the soil that water is moving through. So particles, metals are going to be isolated out before it reaches into your groundwater. Yes, sir.
Sir, please. Okay.
Who is actually involved? Who is it that's going
Okay, two questions there, good questions. The first one was a follow-up of the meeting that Duke had here last Friday about when they offered residential well sampling. We can ask them what they plan to do, how they're going to go about doing that, and we can offer that information on our website. That way, if people are looking at our website and they see the links to other agencies, we can add that. Once we have that information, I can ask them exactly how they're going to go about doing that and include that information on our website. They have a website. It's very good. They've got a lot of really good photos. I don't know if they're going to do that for themselves, put that information out, but I can ask them what they plan to do with that promise, how they're going to go about getting it done, and how they're going to let people know. Whatever their answer is, we can share that through our website. And the second part of that question was, who's in control of this? Who does Duke answer to in this response? And we can answer that as well.
To answer the specific about the well testing, I'll go back and meet with Duke tonight, and I'll ask them that question and get them to publish, information on what they promised. So who's in charge here? This is a little bit of a complicated incident because it occurred in North Carolina, right? It traveled through North Carolina, waters in North Carolina, then it came into the Commonwealth and back into North Carolina. Jurisdiction is a question, it's an issue. We've determined that the EPA is going to take the role, and EPA is in charge. So currently, for the emergency response, and I don't want to go into jargon, but some folks who have been emergency responders, Miles and I are currently in unified command with Duke. And what we like to say is we're the 51% of the decision. Duke is the 50%, we're the 51%. So we can, bounce things and, get, and have things done. So we're going to take the role on the cleanup and the assessment and the potential cleanup of the river. Oversight. Yeah. Because Miles and I operate under specific authority that's published in federal law, and we got to be careful that we stay in our lane. But we do have the ability, once we complete the assessment, we get the data back. We do have the ability to enter into an order with Duke, and where we then oversee the cleanup that we directed them to do. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, it's very broad. That's in a nutshell how things go. And a question also with your drinking water wells. During this period of assessment, if we determine that there's a shallow well or there's an issue with the drinking water, your private well, we're able to do something, but we got to find that link first, and that's part of the assessment. Did I answer everybody's question related to that? Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a question over here, and then we have two questions over there, and then we're going to pack over here. Yes, ma'am. We can do that. Absolutely. It's a very good question. She referred to the fact that we're not able to answer all of the questions here tonight. Either we don't have the authority or we refer to somebody else or a website. And this is actually our first community briefing EPA lead. And so I grabbed guys out of the field and said, let's get out and talk to the folks who live there about what you are doing. And we wanted to gather information as far as what people's concerns are and what the questions are. So when we do go forward, we can address those questions. I can't promise personnel. I can drag these guys out. I can get field experts. Yes, absolutely.
Trust us. What we hate is standing up and not being able to answer questions, and we don't like those difficult questions and us looking and not being able to answer. So we want to bring those people in to answer those questions because it takes the pressure off of us. We've made notes. I've made notes on the needs for what's needed for future meetings, and we're going to do our darndest so I don't have to be the one, or Miles doesn't have to be the one to answer these things. So yes, good point, and we will do everything we can to get folks in to answer those questions.
This kind of meeting also allows us to find out what exactly those questions are, so we do get the right people. And you had did you have a second question? Okay. So there's two over here, and then there's two over here. Ma'am, yes, you had your hand up. I'm going to repeat the question as I walk over. You're suggesting to us that the Fish and Wildlife Service have a way to gather information from people who have observations about and directly and not through EPA. So I'm going to go ahead and.
Okay. Yes. So first of all, we do have some fact sheets here with us that have my contact information directly. So you're certainly welcome to email me or call me directly. The other thing is we can look into setting up a wildlife hotline number if there are any mortality events that you're seeing or things like that. The other thing, observationally, we're not encouraging people to go looking for coal ash, because that's the job of folks who have the right type of training for that work. But I want to assure the folks in this room that it's a high priority for the Fish and Wildlife Service. We recognize that while the material itself may be relatively inert in some cases, a lot of material went into this river, and we are very concerned about that. So one of our highest priorities is getting a better sense of where this material is. And I know it's shared by the other folks here. There are lots of places that stream of information informs, whether it be removal actions or remedial design, or helping us understand what happened to the organisms, the federally endangered fish and mussel species in this river, and some of the other important benthic aquatic organisms that are the basis for our food chain. So we understand that need is real, and we're going to be working aggressively to characterize where that material went and what the impacts are from an ecological standpoint. But to the extent that you all are the eyes and ears, and we're not, like I said, not asking people to look for coal ash, but if you see mortality events, don't hesitate to email me or call me. And at the same time, we'll look to see if we can put a number up to make that information available as well. So the fact sheet is hot off the presses today. It provides additional information about what we're doing, the observations that we're seeing real time in the river. We've worked our way, have teams that have worked their way down to Carr Reservoir. So we certainly have a suite of folks from our offices that have been in the field and are seeing it and are making those measurements and observations, but we appreciate any information about mortality events. Okay. Thank you.
This woman has her hand up. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a second part.
I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about the reporting process. I've been reading that there was a one-day delay between the time that the bill was first identified by Duke and then DENR was notified and the EPA came on the scene. So I'd like to ask EPA, I'd like to ask DENR, if there's representatives here from Duke Energy, I'd also like to ask them to tell us about that reporting process. And I'm really interested if anyone is here from Duke, since they are 49% of the management team here in charge. EPA is 51 and they're 49. So are they?
I'm gonna repeat that. The first part of that question was about notification. Why there was a delay in notification when the incident first happened? Why did it take a day to get to the state? The second part of that question was, is a Duke representative here and able to talk about that? Okay.
He's going to know the best about it.
Okay.
I can talk about it too.
For the notification.
So the exact delay is still under investigation to determine. That's an issue, of course. It's being vetted out. We come in when the state asks us for assistance, and they asked us for assistance, and the EPA immediately responded. I'm sure we can. Is that something you can answer? Okay, so I'll pass it to Corey.
The facts as I know them is that on Monday morning, about 8 a.m., opening of business for our office in Winston-Salem, we received a call from Duke Energy staff alerting us of what was happening. That was the first notification that we had in the Winston-Salem regional office. We did find out later that Duke had done as they were supposed to do and made a 24-hour notification to our emergency hotline on Sunday evening. Why the information did not get from the hotline to me is what we're trying to figure out, and obviously correct that so it doesn't happen again. But as soon as I had notification, first thing Monday morning, we dispatched staff. We were here early morning, and we've been here ever since. I didn't leave the site from Monday until Sunday, this past Sunday. So I was there on point the whole time, and then I was coordinating back with staff, not only in Winston-Salem, but also with Diane and her staff and the ESS branch to make sure that we had all available resources. Does that answer your question?
The second part of the question I can answer. When we started working, I arrived, I think it was Saturday night, and I had heard that Duke had been out talking to people. There was a meeting here, in fact, and they did a lot of Q&A, and they got their message out. And I said, well, who else is going out and answering questions? And it seemed like Duke was out granting interviews and being very responsive to people who had questions, but it didn't sound like anybody else had the opportunity to do something like this. So I arranged to have, Miles and I arranged to have, and Kevin, to come out and answer questions specifically for EPA, what we're doing, what our role is, and because we had a lot of questions. And I let Duke know that this was happening, and I specifically said, I don't want you to hijack my meeting, because I want really people to, because they have a lot of information and they've got a lot of questions, but they've already had their chance to come out, and they're going to do it again too. So for this particular night, I said, please come if you want to come, because there's probably going to be a lot of questions that you're going to be interested in. But I'm really going to focus on what EPA is doing, what the state is doing. And that's going to take up a lot of time, because we're also going to be doing Q&A specifically for our role and our responsibilities. I think, let me ask, did anybody come from Duke? Yes, someone in the background. So it's not that they weren't invited. They were invited, but I did ask that they allow us to talk about what we've done. So yes, there is somebody from the room here. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sheila Banks. I'm just a concerned citizen. First of all, I want to thank you for coming in and for giving us the opportunity to come and hear what you have to say. A lot of us find you very trusting, and it's very helpful to hear what you have to say, and that you're taking care of it. I would personally prefer that you not have to come here to begin with over this. So that's kind of where my concern is coming in. Just today, I learned again that in West Virginia, the water they had more problems just today. And so the concern is that we've got to get through this, and I know it's going to take a very, very long time for everything to be taken care of. And I don't know if we'll ever get it back where we really want it to be. But then my concern is about more of these happening, not only in our community, but in other communities. I understand that there are over 1,000 of these pits around. And the EPA, I know, would like to be able to do more to help with that. So I think it would be very helpful if someone from the EPA would make the effort to come back in, as she mentioned before, but not necessarily to speak specifically to this, but what we can do to make sure that we get these pits taken care of, and other things that we can do to tighten restrictions so that we don't hear that this could have been prevented if someone had been checking a pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and
I know you can't specifically address that, but it is something that we do need to address, or more communities are going to be calling for you to come into it and handle such issues.
Okay. Can you repeat that? Yes, thank you.
So excellent point shared by, the last one I'm working into that. Excellent point shared by everyone I'm going to say in this room. And I'm going to sum it up as prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. How do you stop it from happening? What I can tell you just from the start, I talked about how I know a lot of these people already. We have called local emergency planning commissions. And that's where we talk about and we work with the local industries to see if their plans, emergency plans, emergency notifications, the call down lists, they're all up to date. So the notifications to me, that was a concern about any sort of delay. Also, facility response plans, depending upon what sort of chemicals they have there. Now, admittedly, that's more focused towards the big, the chemical plants that you see, and that's what's focused on when they're always near a river because that's when they're built. So there's a lot of inherent problems just from where they're built and historically why they're there. We're very well aware of that. In the point of policy, none of us up here are politicians, okay? We are people that are working within the regulation that our friends in D.C., I do say it with a smirk a little bit, our friends in D.C. put in place. I got to stay in the lane, so I can't regulate them and say, I don't like what you have here, you have to close it down. I can't do that. We have to stay in what our responsibilities are, and everyone across this row has the same thing. We're bound by the regulations in place. So what you can do is you can write your elected officials to try to get it changed. But we're bound by it. So we'll do whatever we can to plan and try to prepare better and make sure that the inspections are done from our respective other divisions, because I'm not doing an inspection on it, but someone in EPA might, or someone in DEQ might, or someone in DENR might. I will not try to tell you that I know all those programs, all the regs. It's hard enough knowing all the regs in our program. But well taken, and again, talk to your elected officials. That's the best way.
I just found out that we have the room until 8:30. Wherever we're allowed to linger, but we only have this room until 8:30. So, ma'am, you had your hand out for quite a while. Okay, I'm going to repeat. It sounds like the first thing was more of a concern because you said that there's a lot of people in the community that fish not recreational but actually for food, and so that's a concern that we should be aware of. And the second one was who's testing?
How long will it take before, based on other ecological disasters, how long has it taken in those situations before you actually saw levels in the fish that are being tested by biologists?
So the question is, how long after an incident such as this does it take before you see effects in the fish that you are testing? And the third part of that was signage. Signage. Who would be the fish advisories?
Yeah, because I haven't done fish testing.
Would that be?
I can speak to the
ecological fish testing, but I believe the question is more of a human health related.
Human health.
Fish advisory.
Can you talk
So
about the fish
what you're
advisory?
talking about is basically a sustenance fishery where people are using it to sustain themselves. And that's certainly something that, from a human health standpoint, I can't speak to, I don't know if there are any of the environmental health folks who are here, but, in terms of the ecological fish testing, that's something that we certainly have purview over and have an intention to do. But I think the question was more for this gentleman over there.
And unfortunately, I don't have the answer for that either, but I know who does back in my office in Richmond with our epidemiology and toxicology folks. So I will take that question back to them and get a response. And I hate to say it, but I'll pass it to my newfound friends to put on their website. I'm not hating to say you're my newfound
No, that's
friend.
fine.
I will follow up because whether it's ecological or human health, the aspect that you're trying to get at is recovery time. And recovery time is something that is not specific to the toxicology necessarily or the toxicological effects, but more the product that's in the system and how long it takes for that system to recover itself. So it's a difficult question to answer simply because every skill in that case is a little bit different. So the lessons learned from other ecological disasters certainly inform where we are today, but each system is different, and that's where the site assessment and the additional characterization of river impact is going to be very important for us to better understand and answer a question like that. So it's too soon to tell. I'm sorry, that's probably the answer.
I think the last part of that question was about notification, that a lot of people don't have news or TV or internet, and how do we get word out? As a community involvement coordinator, that's something that I can relate to because we have concerns about how do we get our message out, regardless of whatever we're working on. We really like to come out into the community like this, talk to people personally for whatever the project may be. If I don't know if a fish advisory subject matter would be something that we could have a meeting about, but as far as notification for anything that we are involved in, we would like to talk to people in person as well as the internet. The internet is a great tool. We rely on it, but it's not the only tool. This is very helpful for us, and I hope it's helpful for you. The gentleman in the back has had his hand up quite a while. I'm going to repeat that question. You had a question about the regulation of the pipe that failed because it was concrete and corrugated, and should it have been concrete throughout is the question.
Duke has provided some historical perspective, and around the 1950s it was put in. Clearly, it was put in at two different times, or two different it was replaced once, and then they put concrete in. I was not around then, but I can tell you that the regulations in the 50s aren't what they are today. So even if we knew that it doesn't meet regulation today, which I'm guessing here, I'm assuming, but it wouldn't, I don't know what the regulations would have been at the time it was installed. So it's a very difficult question. Certainly moving forward, it would have to be up to today's standards. And I know that doesn't answer your question, but I just really have no way of knowing.
On a site like this, there should have been some kind of inspection done on it.
We repeat that.
Yeah, the question was on something like this, there should have been some sort of inspection. And I would not be the one doing that inspection. I'm sure someone would. It was, I don't even know, the record came out, but it wasn't for the pipe. So I wouldn't be able to tell you. I'm sure there's some sort of permitting issue on inspection of a pipe. But again, unfortunately, it's not something that I'm involved in. I know that falls into, she left, category of we have to pass it along, but our focus was really on the removal, the emergency part. Sorry.
We're going to try to take 5 more questions, depending on the length. And the gentleman in the back has had his hand on quite a bit. I'm looking.
He's walking around.
Okay. But I'm going to repeat the question. Could you repeat the question so I can repeat the question?
Is there
A plan in place. Okay.
Is there a plan to get us water?
Okay. So in the case that the water is not drinkable, it's unsafe, is there a plan in place to get you safe drinking water?
A very good question, Barry Duncan, the city of Danville. First of all, we have several things that benefit. One is we have about 2 days storage or 2.5 days storage and more if we conserve already stored in our storage tanks in Blue Park and the system storage tanks. So any kind of contamination event, we have 2.5 to 3 days storage and a little bit more if we issue a conservation notice where industry would conserve and so forth. Right now we have an interconnection with the Pennsylvania County Service Authority. They take water from us. They currently on the west side take water from Henry County Service Authority, and that pipeline is interconnected with us. We are working with them now as an emergency connection to get water back to our system through that already existing interconnection. Now, that wouldn't be enough water to serve the entire city by any means, but it will allow us through a conservation mode to at least have water where we could get to some of the customers and have a place where people could go and get water. But we always have emergency plans in place in terms of natural disasters, which this would come under that category, whereby bottled water and trucked water and things like that would be brought in if needed. But we have over 2.5 days of storage based on our current usage. So we have a window there, and that was one of the things that helped us too, that we can always use to our benefit. One other question, I guess, was asked about collection of drinking water analysis too, and I want to be sure that people knew that the city of Danville has been collecting water samples too. Duke Power was taking samples, 4 to 6 samples a day initially, and now that's been cut back some to 4 samples a day, and then we're now cutting back to probably, they hadn't been approved yet, but probably 2 samples a day, and they're using a contract laboratory rather than their own laboratory. So it's a lot of testing going on, and the city is doing testing too.
So we have a question here.
That was an excellent rundown of that. But in addition to that, too, I'm not sure who asked that question initially. Jeff Wells with the Office of Drinking Water here in Danville. And we were over with the city and with the Duke officials when we were first evaluating the city's treatment process to see if they could handle this coal ash load. And part of the discussions that we had at that time was, okay, what do we do if we cannot treat this water and provide safe water to the residents of the city of Danville? And that was something that we did talk about during that time. Duke Energy was going to bring in bottled water. They were going to bring in truckloads of water at several locations around the city if it was needed. And my office of Drinking Water, we would have provided a notice out along with the city saying that you cannot use the water. Or maybe you could use the water to flush your toilets. Yeah, sorry about that. But so those preliminary plans were in place. Thank goodness we did not have to implement them, but we did have that discussion.
I think we're going to have time. Actually, we're kind of out of time, but we promised a woman here and the man in the back. So we have 2 more official questions, and then we're going to have to move out and talk to you individually. We will stay. We just won't be able to stay in here. So if you don't mind, and then the gentleman in the back.
My name is Gail Jordan, and I'm a concerned citizen. From the pictures that you had, was the coal ash going in before the spill? I mean, were they dumping it in there? We didn't know that all along?
Okay. The question is, looking at the photos up here, is it possible that there was coal ash entering the river before the spill, as in dumping? We can talk too about the history of the site somehow. We've been relying on Duke's historic data as to what was in that, because obviously we weren't here before the spill. We were not here before the spill. What was the purpose of this facility if not to dump it in the river? So that goes to what is the purpose of the coal ash pond in itself? Do we have somebody that could answer that one? About the coal ash pond?
All I can reiterate is we weren't there to see dump it, and I wouldn't envision the purpose was to dump it in the river. There's, it settles in the pond.
So this is okay. So this is a coal ash management pond. So and again, this is I go to railroad accidents, truck accidents, now coal ash releases. So bear with me. But after coal's burned, just like if you burn something in your fireplace, right, it generates an ash. That ash was moved to the basin and stored in that basin. The ash wasn't meant to be dumped anywhere, so it stays in that basin, and that's how they manage it. And throughout, the ash was not being dumped into the river. Now, however, if there's any illicit discharges from this, we'll find it because we're doing an assessment on the river. So the ash wasn't being dumped into the river; it was basically like a landfill, okay, just open, but it was being put there and stored in there, so it wasn't being dumped. The pipe was a storm drain, so the pipe went underneath of it, right, and it drained the storm water coming down. Okay, it wasn't draining the coal ash until the hole happened, and we're still trying to figure out why the hole happened. Okay.
All these ponds leach into the river, they leach into groundwater. You know that every single one of them. You shouldn't apologize for doing that.
I didn't apologize.
Thank you. I was just informed that they're not actually going to kick us out. We now have to end the meeting as an official meeting, meaning that the live stream that has been going on is not going to be continuing, but we can stay, so we can still talk and answer your questions. And this gentleman has been waiting very patiently, and then we'll be able to take more now because they're not actually going to boost us out. Sir. The question is which county? Pennsylvania County, is it? I'll let you.
Yeah.
Is this on?
I'm not sure if that is on. No, it might be off.
I think
So-
our mic is off, so we're just going to shout. If you want to come up.